We hear more and more about virtual worlds, places like Second Life, where you can indeed lead an entire second life just sitting at a computer while your better-looking avatar roams around having adventures. And now educators are starting to take a closer look at these technologies. For one thing, virtual universities would be a lot cheaper to build and run. There are also great creative possibilities for students and teachers, as long as everyone is able to get in through the virtual doors. Annie Haswell takes up the story.
Imagine if instead of gathering the books and laptop and heading off to catch the bus to uni, you just turned on the computer and your stylishly dressed avatar wandered into a virtual campus, one likely to look quite different to your average university. Dr Denise Wood from UniSA has been involved in designing and teaching in virtual worlds for several years.
We can design an island any way we like, and in fact we've got several islands, not just the one. The original island we set up was called UniSA, and we created that pretty much like a futuristic version of the university campus. So we did have buildings and so forth, but we also had some fairly innovative approaches. For example, the theatre was a cave, a hollowed out cave where audience could come and watch a performance on stage. Our tutorials were conducted on a beach, basically, with the avatars sitting on beach blankets or towels and on rocks and on surfboards and so forth, with the lapping waves behind us and dolphins coming out of the water.
While beach-themed tutorials sound much more inviting than the usual kind, Denise Wood says the real advantage in being able to create any environment you want is that it can be tailored to what's being taught.
We've also set up virtual worlds in virtual islands on Reaction Grid, which is another virtual world. We've been trialling health sciences courses for RMIT there, and that's set up very much as a clinical type environment. So essentially you can construct the world to suit the particular learning objectives of the course.
21 universities around the country are now experimenting with the 3D virtual world. At Monash, students can study Chinese on Chinese Island and interact with Chinese speakers overseas. The University of Queensland offers Religion Bazaar, a virtual environment complete with mosques, synagogues and temples, where religious studies students can wander and, if they like, experience a bit of empathy by taking on an avatar with a different gender or culture. It's a huge step into the future from mere online teaching.
One has a sense of presence that you don't get just from email or a discussion forum. There really is a sense of presence where students represented by their avatars are in the one space together. It also means that we can teleport, which is the term we use to mean to transport an avatar from one location to another. We can have guest lecturers from anywhere in the world to come into those sessions and talk to the students. And for the students, it's an experience because of the sense of presence. It's an experience of almost being in the same room with perhaps a top researcher or a top academic from the other side of the world.
But as the technology has moved forward, Denise Wood was concerned that those who had the most to gain may not be keeping up.
I was very conscious as we started to explore the potential of these virtual worlds for teaching and learning that we were going to be meeting some challenges in terms of making it accessible for students with disabilities.
Her concerns have led to the setting up of an international team.
Hi Denise.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
How are you?
Charles Morris is a freelance software developer based in the US. He's one of several people Denise is working with around the world on practical solutions to make sure people with disabilities will be able to access the new virtual universe.
The text-to-speech working okay now?
Yeah, the primary text-to-speech is working. All of the
Charles is currently working on a program that will help visually impaired people find their way around in a virtual world.
We've created Max, the virtual guide dog, who is a digital embodiment of a guide dog, and he performs mostly the same functions that a true guide dog does. He sort of tells you what's around you, helps you navigate, around obstacles and move from place to place.
So your role is to provide the audio cues to tell them what world they're in.
Right, what world they're in, who's standing next to them, what those people are typing, what their spatial relationship is to them. Second Life has now incorporated voice communication, so they use that quite a bit as well. But it's still a little spotty as far as how well it works. One of the nice things they've done is they've included spatial sound. So if a sound is happening off to your left, it's more prominent in the left side of your earpiece. So, it gives it that three-dimensional quality that we all enjoy visually. They tend to enjoy orally. So it's an interesting process to watch.
Charles is one of the founders of Virtual Helping Hands, a group that works with people with disabilities to find out what they need to access virtual worlds. His job is then to find a way of making that happen.
Another thing that we deal with is some of our members or friends are unable to speak. So we've created an application we call Max Voice, which allows them to type, and then the text-to-speech engine renders that speech out in voice and passes it through a communications channel like Skype. So they're able to engage in a Skype conversation, or, like an internet DJ is able to speak over the top of the music. They're able to do that with this computer-synthesized voice.
What kind of feedback do you get from people about how it changes their lives?
Very positive feedback. Actually, it's very amazing. One of my very, very good friends is on a respirator, and so he's unable to speak. For him to be able to come online and talk, it was a great experience for him, and he shared that experience with me. And I was really, really delighted to see just, how he kind of came alive and just bubbled, even using the computer synthesized voice. You could tell there was emotion there as he was, actually able to talk with people and carry on a voice conversation.
While Charles and other researchers are plugging away overseas on software accessibility solutions, in Australia, Denise Wood has had her multimedia students consulting disabled people on problems they might be having with hardware, like using the mouse or the keyboard. Cameron Milton was one of those students.
Some of the problems that they had is, like, some people couldn't really use the mouse. They have RSI in their right hand, and so they couldn't use the right-hand side of the screen. They could use the left-hand side, but not the right-hand side. So I ended up just lightly changing some of the keyboard commands and things like that so they could use the left-hand side of the keyboard without using the right-hand side. This one guy who really wanted to ride a motorbike, that's all he wanted to do. He was, once he got on it and started being able to use it, he was just ecstatic. It was really kind of eye-opening to how much of an impact something that's just effectively a cluster of pixels can really be.
Do you get the impression that for some people it almost is a whole world?
It's definitely for some people. I mean, for some people it's their main income. It's the main thing that keeps them going. It's the main thing that keeps them going mentally and healthy. And it's also the way that they mainly network with people. It's effectively they are replacing certain parts of their physical life with a virtual life for whatever benefit is for them. Yeah, some people are completely hooked into it.
I'm David Wallace. I'm a quadriplegic. I've been one for nearly 30 years. Started using computers back in the early 80s, basically as a way to do life, really.
David Wallace has a government IT job, but the day I meet him, he's having a stint in hospital and his mum's visiting.
Oh, I've watched David type with that stick in his mouth for years, and he still amazes me that he can go tick, 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 tick with his stick far quicker than I can type.
Well, just a wooden coat hanger with a thimble one end and a bit of plastic the other end. I use it because it's bent. I use it from bed, it's better. But otherwise you make them out of Perspex rod with a thimble one end and some plastic the other end. Light, strong, renewable, cheap.
I suppose the thimble makes it non-slip as well.
Yeah, and you can turn pages with it if you need to.
The mouth stick is the kind of tinkering homemade solution David Wallace loves and likes to share. He runs a website called Life Kludger.
The kludge is a way or a workaround things, which is something I've done all the time, just sort of modifying or adapting or things. And so Life Kludger really was a way of bringing together all these thoughts and all the things and a medium of sharing what I do, but on the net and around the world, people exist that I call makers, and the whole concept behind it was a way of bringing makers and livers together. So I call people that need things livers, and people that make things makers. And there's heaps of people that just like to tinker with things. So they pull Roomba floor robots apart to make robots out of them because they're a good platform and for the fun of it. There's people that hack Wii controllers to control cursors on a computer for the fun of it because they can and for experiments. Well, these things can be really useful to people like me who need these adaptive stuff. So I really see Life Collaborator as a platform to bring people who make things for fun and need things to life together, but trying to scale that and make it so that it's a worldwide concern or get it out there is a bit of a big uphill push. But so in the meantime, it's really just a medium where I can share what I do and share things I find and hope that people jump on board.
After 30 years of using technology to widen his world, David says Second Life and virtual worlds have made a particularly big difference.
For me, it's a creative environment which I can control myself, and so I can have a lot more means and ways of expression than I can, in a physical world, or even in some other two-dimensional sort of programming thing. You can also do those things within a social context, so you can participate in things with other people in a social context which you can't in a physical environment. And that's why it's important that people are there. So I found that a lot of what I do, even in terms of have some sort of recreation thing or game or whatever, I always tend to gravitate where people are. So I think it's being able to do things within the social context that gets me, and knowing that there's real people at the end of it. Yeah.
He's struggling at the moment, though, with the latest computer hardware trends, touch technology that requires skin-on-screen contact and can't be accessed with his mouth stick.
When they build in a hardware device where they say the only way you can use this is by something with the skin touching it, there's no option. For years and years and years, for nearly 20 years, I've found technology has been an enabler and something that's helped me. I've had to get around different parts of it and kludge around and make it work for me, but I've always found it's given me hope and something that I've always been able to get around it. But some of this stuff's getting harder and harder. Yeah.
The corporate inventors probably don't even notice that they're leaving people like David behind. The best hope for people with disabilities is that as education moves into the virtual world, more research will go into making sure everyone can get to that virtual tutorial. And that people like Charles Morris will keep working away on their little miracles like his Max the virtual guide dog.
When I first got the idea to start developing accessibility software, I was working in virtual worlds, and people. I was talking to someone who was visually impaired, and they started talking about blind people using this virtual world. And I thought, well, why make this accessible? We don't have any blind people in here. And then it dawned on me, whoa, we don't have any blind people in here because it's not accessible. The only reason they weren't there is because nobody had taken the steps to make it even possible for them to be there. One thing I've learned working with the visually impaired is that you don't have to make it easy. You just have to make it possible. These are people who are looking to find a way to do this, and they're willing to put in the time and the effort to make it work. Even when we think it's not possible, there's usually a way to make it happen.
Charles Morris from Virtual Helping Hands, ending that report from Annie Haswell. And Dr. Denise Wood, who featured in that story, received the 2010 Christopher Newell Prize for Telecommunications and Disability for her research, adding $20,000 to her research funds.